Let me briefly walk you through the main points we discussed last week. We said that Freud is the founder of this theory, and then we talked about the word psychology and its etymology, where it comes from. And then we discussed the pre-Freudian period, the period before Freud, when people didn't know about the unconscious mind. They didn't know about the id, the ego, and the superego. It went by the name of human nature or human behavior or human conduct. But as a science, psychology was born in the 20th century, the beginning of the 20th century. Before the 20th century, the human mind was not the scientific subject of study. And we also said that Freud's contribution to the field of psychology was his concept of the unconscious mind. And we talked about the unconscious mind according to Freud. And in the unconscious mind, Freud says there are hidden drives which compel us, which control our behavior. So that what we really think is why we are doing something might not be the real reason. The real reason may be lurking in our unconscious mind. So our unconscious mind is really the controller and the prime mover of our actions. And before Freud, people knew about the social mask, which they called hypocrisy, lying, dishonesty, maneuvering. But with Freud, we were introduced to a new kind of mask. It's not a mask we use to hide ourselves from people, but the mask we use to hide ourselves from ourselves. And this was, at that time, this was something new. And when we say there are hidden motives, it means we have to examine the human mind in order to know the real motives or causes of our behavior. Only in that case, we would be able to understand our behavior. And I gave you a case study, this case of a woman, which we already discussed last week. We referred to Freud's analogy of the iceberg to explain his model of the human mind, which is divided mainly into two sectors. The tip of the iceberg represents the conscious mind, and the larger part of the iceberg, which is submerged under the surface of the water and is invisible to the human eye, that would be the unconscious mind. This is Freud's analogy. And then we went on and talked about the preconscious also as part of the human mind. And then we talked about the id and the ego and the superego. So all these actually are sectors or parts or segments of the human mind. We have the conscious, the preconscious, the unconscious, the subconscious, the ego, the superego, and the id. We discussed them, and then we talked about the id and moved to I compared Freud's drives to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and then we discussed the superego and the conflict between the id and the superego, and we also discussed the role of the ego as a regulator that strikes a balance between the two, the id and the superego. And then I gave you an example of how these three cooperate in order to create a healthy mind. According to Freud, a healthy mind is a mind that has a balance between the id and the superego. I gave you examples about that, and we talked about what happens when the ego malfunctions. When you have a weak ego, what would happen? We also talked about that. The leniency of the ego, and we discussed examples from history in which the superego is overactive, and examples again from history where the id is overactive and wins the war. And we said that according to Freud, whether your superego is overactive or whether your id is overactive, in both cases, you do not have a healthy mind. Healthy mind is a mind that that achieves a balance between these two. And we also talked about the stages of neurotic behavior. We said that when a drive is satisfied, then there is no problem. We have satisfaction, and that's it, full stop. But the problem arises when a drive is frustrated. So when a drive is frustrated, the result is discomfort, and that's normal. We all face discomfort. All of us face a point or many situations in life where uh, our drives are frustrated. It leads to discomfort, but the problem is when this discomfort is prolonged, it lasts for a long time, then it turns into neurosis. And we said that neurosis is a mild case of mental disorder, which could be treated, uh, but it could be self-treated. But the problem is when this neurosis uh, is prolonged, continues, then it would lead to mental disorder. And in that case, self-treatment is not going to work, and no layman can really help you out. You need a specialist uh, when it comes. So we have to be careful not to reach this stage of disorder, whether for ourselves or for others, like family members, children. That's why it's very important to watch out for kids and observe their behavior. Childhood is a very critical, crucial, and important stage in our lives, because most of the things we do in adulthood can be traced back to childhood experiences. I gave you an example of toilet training because you see, we said that childhood experiences could affect future behavior, adult behavior, and a very good example is toilet training during childhood. You have no idea to what extent this could affect adult behavior. So don't underestimate basic needs. They might be the cause of mental breakdown. We discussed terms which are crucial to psychoanalysis, and they are established terms in psychology. These terms are drives, satisfaction, frustration. So we said that drives are instincts or motives or needs which must be satisfied. Satisfaction of drives means they are given what they exactly want. So, for example, you feel thirsty, you drink water. Drinking water is the process of satisfaction of the thirst drive. Frustration is the opposite of satisfaction. It means you deny or block the drive. So when you feel thirsty, you don't drink water. Not drinking water, depriving yourself of water, is called in psychology frustration, drive frustration. And we also said that frustration could be self-imposed or externally imposed, like socially imposed. Self-imposed frustration means you decide. It means you, when I say you, I mean your ego. Your ego decides not to satisfy a drive. Examples of, I think I gave you examples of drive frustration is like when you're at a meeting and you decide not to eat or not to drink water, not to satisfy, or when you are fasting, you're fasting, so it's you abstain yourself from food. Nobody's forcing you not to eat or drink. You are forcing yourself not to eat or drink. I mean, your ego has decided to frustrate this drive. This is an example, or these are examples of self-imposed frustration. As to externally imposed frustration, it means somebody is preventing you from satisfying a drive. Otherwise, you would satisfy it. But some, like when parents punish or ground their kids, their children, they say you're not going to eat, or you're not going to drink this, or so this is frustration of the drive. Or when food is not available or water is not available. Somebody who's in the desert, in the middle of the desert, feels thirsty, wants to satisfy a drive, but there is no water to drink. So this is an example of externally imposed frustration. In psychoanalysis, we have 6 types of behavior which come as a reaction to frustrated drive. What does this mean? It means when one of your drives is frustrated, what would you do? You see, what would you do? What's your reaction? We have 6 types of behavioral reactions or responses to frustration. 6 types. The first type of behavior is called compensation. You compensate for this frustration. It's called compensation. And to make these types clear, let's take a case in point. Let's take a case, job hunting. Job hunting means, searching for a job. People need jobs because jobs satisfy a drive. The need for a job is not a drive. A job can get you money, and money can get you food, and food is going to satisfy your drive. The opposite of occupation, which means having a job, is unemployment. Unemployment frustrates these drives. Why? Because when somebody does not have a job, they don't have money, therefore they can't buy food and water. The first type of behavior which people may engage in when their drives are frustrated is compensation. And we have 2 types of compensation, negative and positive. And by compensation, it means you find another way to satisfy your need. So how can you find another way to satisfy, an alternative? That's compensation. There is negative compensation and positive compensation. Look at the negative compensation here. Negative compensation says, Of course, this happens when your id is overactive. So I can't find a job, so I will rob a bank. I'll steal money. I'll steal. I can't get money by through a job, so I'm going to get money by robbing a bank. I'll steal money. And remember, the id is talking here, and the id does not care about right and wrong. The only thing the id cares about is satisfaction. It doesn't care how or where or when or who, it doesn't care. It only wants satisfaction. The id functions on the pleasure principle, as we mentioned. The end justifies the means. This is what the id believes in. It doesn't care how. And robbing a bank is compensation, but because it is a violation of the law and it's a sin, stealing is a sin, therefore it's classified as negative compensation. Negative compensation. But we also have positive compensation. Here's an example of positive compensation. I can't find a job, so I'll marry a rich woman. Or I will become a beggar on the street and get money. People will give me money if I sit on the streets and beg. Well, notice that, see, I'm not saying that these are ideal solutions. I'm not saying that these are good solutions, but these solutions do not involve breaking the law. You see, they are you're not breaking the law by doing that. We have a good solution, we have a better solution, and we have the best solution. So, but what's important about this solution is it does not involve a sin. It's not a sin to ask for money. It's not a sin to marry a rich woman. I mean, the woman is happy about it, and you're happy about it. Everybody's happy about it, and there's no problem. You're not violating the law, and it's not against the law. It's not against the religion. So, because it's not against the law, it's not against ethics and religion, we are calling it positive compensation. But is it the best solution? Is it the no? Of course not. You remember we have 6 types of behavior as reactions to frustration. This is only one type. Compensation is only one type. So now we can move on to the second type of behavior exhibited at frustration, which is aggression. And unlike compensation, we don't have negative aggression and positive aggression. We only have negative aggression. Aggression cannot be positive. We cannot have positive aggression. No, aggression is always negative. And as I said, aggression is always negative. And here's an example of aggression. Like, I can't find a job, so I will have my revenge. This guy is going to have his revenge. On whom? I don't know, but on anybody or anything that he thinks is, behind this, behind behind his unemployment. Like, I don't have a job, probably. The manager of this company did not give me a job. He is rich and I don't have money, and the day after day he's getting richer and I'm getting poorer, so I'm going to have my revenge, on this guy, on this businessman, or probably on the institution itself, on all this guy might develop a kind of mental disorder and start revenging himself on all rich people, on all businessmen, probably. and he might become a serial killer, right? Uh, so you have to be careful, because, as I said, discomfort may lead to neurosis. Neurosis may lead to mental disorder, and this guy could be, if he's not treated, and nobody's going to help him, if you leave him to his own devices, he might become a serial killer because his neurosis might develop into mental disorder. The third type of behavior is displacement. And again, we don't have positive displacement. We only have negative displacement. Displacement means blaming someone else. You put the blame on someone else. So I can't find a job because of the economic situation in the country. So you blame it on economy. And you start generalizing. The problem with this is, I'm not saying it's wrong. It could be true. Your argument could be valid. But the problem with, but why are we calling it displacement? Because of two reasons. Reason number one, you're not really trying seriously to solve the problem. Number two, you stop at that. You put a full stop. You say, it's not my fault. It's the economy. And then you put a full stop. And if everybody discusses this topic with you, you say, no, 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 no. Don't discuss it with me. I know the cause. It's the economy. And I'm not the only one. Everybody is like this. Nobody has a job. So you're not doing anything. You're not trying to find another behavior. You are fixed, or as Freud says, fixated, in this third behavioral response. You're not thinking outside the box. The fourth type of behavior is withdrawal, is deciding not to face the music. And again, we have negative and positive withdrawal. An example of negative withdrawal in our case of job hunting is, I can't find a job, so I will try to drown my sorrow in alcohol. In other words, people will try to forget the problem, not to face it, by hanging around with friends, going out, going to the bar, drinking alcohol, gambling, playing games, probably video games, wasting their time, wasting their effort. Uh, and this is negative, of course. It's negative withdrawal. You try to forget it, you know. And an example of positive withdrawal is when you say, for example, I can't find a job, so I will stay home and focus on my hobbies. So you stay home and focus on your hobbies. Hobbies, I mean constructive hobbies, like, for example, painting, writing, gardening. Some people like gardening. They have a backyard and they grow vegetables and fruits in the backyard, taking care of the garden, playing with their children, teaching their children, taking their children out, spending their time with their wives, with their children. I want to tell you something important, something very important. I have a note about withdrawal. When we said we have negative withdrawal and positive withdrawal, we're talking about the behavior you will engage with when you withdraw. Like, what are you gonna do? It's your action which makes withdrawal negative or positive. So definitely, growing vegetables in your garden or spending time with your children and wife and children is not like drinking alcohol and gambling. You see, it's different. That's why we said there is negative withdrawal and positive withdrawal. But if you think about it in the long run, if you think of the ultimate final outcome, the result, the final result, withdrawal is definitely negative, whether it's positive or negative. Even positive withdrawal is negative. Why negative, the final result? Because you're not solving the problem. You're escaping from the problem. You're not facing the problem. It's not going to fix the problem. It's not a solution. Escape is not a solution. Now let's move on to the fifth type of behavior, which is adjustment. And we have positive and negative adjustment. Negative adjustment, you say, I don't want to lose my job. So I'm going to engage in apple polishing and flirt my boss, or I will be his snitch, the boss's snitch. What does that mean? Imagine that you don't have a job and you're searching for a job. So instead of just going and applying to a job, you try to make friends with the manager. Like you bring the manager gifts and presents. You invite the manager to lunch, for example. You try to make friends with the manager and probably even become a snitch for the manager. And if you already have a job and you want to keep this job, you do some apple polishing. I'm sure probably you have heard of such situations when employees try to come closer and closer to the manager in order to keep their job. You know, by through observation, yeah, this is very good. It's these are hypocritical people, definitely, and this kind of behavior is called adjustment, but it's negative adjustment. Now, let me give you an example of positive adjustment. Positive adjustment goes like this. I can't find a job, so I have to move to another city or another country. Maybe there are jobs available there, or I'm going to improve my skills and improve my qualifications in order to be eligible for the job. So this is kind of like you're not blaming anybody. You're trying to solve the problem seriously because you're digging for the real cause. What's the real cause? Here you are, it's like research. It's like you're doing research. What is the real cause behind this? Why do other people have a job? You start comparing yourself with others. Like, why do other people have a job and I don't? Maybe I'm in the wrong place. Maybe I have the wrong skills. Maybe my skills are not enough. Maybe my qualifications are not enough. So probably I'm going to boost my qualifications, get a higher degree. This is called positive adjustment, and it's positive because you're trying to seriously find out the real cause, which may be you, which the cause may be inside you, not outside you. So we can now move on to the sixth type of behavior, which is repression. And repression is always negative. It's like bottling up your feelings. Notice there's a slight difference between repression and withdrawal. You know, in both you are not facing the truth. In both withdrawal, we said you don't face the truth. Repression also means you don't face the truth. But the difference is that in withdrawal, in order to forget, you busy yourself with something else. Repression is you don't try to busy yourself with something else. You just simply repress it. You see, in withdrawal, there's an outlet. In repression, there's no outlet. Repression is you don't do anything. You just bottle it up, which is more dangerous than withdrawal. Repression is more dangerous than withdrawal, and there's always negative. We don't have uh, positive repression. Here's an example of uh, of repression. I say I can't find a job, so I will not talk about it. That's it. I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to practice my hobbies, and I'm simply not going to talk about it. So I don't want to talk about this, for example. And it's, as I said, it's always negative. So these are the 6 types of behavior which individuals engage in when they face frustration. Here are more examples of behavior, like you have seen adults who are obsessed with animals during adulthood. It could be a result of childhood lack of friends. This is an example of compensation. Uh, Friendship is one of the drives, and if it's frustrated, people might engage in compensation. I can't have a friend, a real friend, a human friend, so I'm going to have an animal friend. I'm not saying anything. I mean, we all love animals. It's okay. But notice, I'm not saying love of animals. We all love animals. I'm saying obsession with animals. It's the obsession with animals. And obsession with animals not during childhood. All children are obsessed with animals, but it's during adulthood. Another example, another case, which is unfortunately increasing in the world these days, is what we find in children, in many children. Many children today have imaginary friends. Now, this has become an established term because this phenomenon is increasing. Children have imaginary friends because they don't have real friends. So they start imagining that they have friends. So you can enter a child's room and see the kid talking, and you say, "Who are you talking to?" And he says, "My friend Jack, he's sitting here next to me. Can't you see him?" It's really a serious case, and it might lead, as I said, frustration of this drive of friendship may lead to discomfort, and if it continues, it may lead to neurosis, and if it continues, it may lead to mental disorder. So such children might develop cases of hallucination in the future. Therefore, it's very important to observe the behavior of children, even when they are alone. It's very important to, observe their behavior. Anyway, so these are examples of more examples of compensation. And this is a nice drill. We applied the 6 behavioral reactions to frustration to job hunting. Now let's apply them to this case. Unhappy marriage, for example. A married man, Imagine a married man is saying this sentence: I'm not happy with my marriage, so what follows so is one of the 6 types of behavior as a result of drive frustration. So I will have an affair. It means I'll have an affair with another woman. This is negative compensation. If he says, I will beat my wife, now I'm going to beat her up, so every day he beats her up and the poor woman is taken to the hospital. This is, what kind of behavior can we call this? We can call it aggression. So we're trying to classify reaction here, human behavior. Like, you are psychologists, you are observing this man and you are classifying his behavior. And if he says It's all my wife's fault, or her parents' fault, or all women are the same, are like this. This is what kind of behavior? This is displacement, putting the blame on someone else. I will give more time to my job and my hobbies. So forget about my wife. I'll give more time to my job. So such a man, you'll find him always busy with his work, even at home. He doesn't spend time with his wife. He spends it just working, or probably friends or hobbies. So this is a positive withdrawal. Negative withdrawal is I'll hang out with friends and come home only when I go to bed. So when I'm tired at night, I'm hanging out with friends, and I come home at night because I'm tired and I need to sleep, so I come home and sleep. This is negative withdrawal. She says, okay, I'll promise her. So he goes to her and says, honey, I love you so much, and I'll change my behavior, and I'm gonna do everything that makes you happy. Of course, these are all lies, all right? I don't know if she believes him or not, but this type of behavior is negative adjustment. He's trying to solve the problem through dishonesty. So he says, I'm gonna change, I'm gonna do this and that for you. You are the love of my life, and blah, blah, blah. If she believes him, she'll say, okay, the problem is solved, but only temporarily, because he can't keep his promises. That's the problem. Positive adjustment would be he would say, I will discuss the problem with her to see what's wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. We don't know. We have to find the real cause of the problem. So you discuss it with her seriously. Then I will solve the problem. It may be my fault. Maybe I'll have to change something inside me. See, this is positive adjustment. And finally, repression is I'm not going to talk about this. Sorry, about this, not his. There is T missing here. If somebody interferes, like, what's the problem with you and your wife? What's the problem with you two guys? And you say, I don't want to talk about it. I simply don't want to talk about it. This is repression. Great, okay. And another drill, which you do yourself. I mean, I'm not going to do this for you, but this is another example to study human behavior. It's drill number 2. Failure at a study program. This is a case of a student. Let's say a student fails a course, flunks a course. So he says, I flunked this course, like I failed in this course. So you have to provide examples of negative compensation, positive compensation, aggression, displacement, positive withdrawal, negative adjustment, positive adjustment, and repression. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. It depends on which type of behavior is listed here. So that's a nice drill for students of psychology and students of literary theory to engage in. Let me ask you a question. I mean, after we explained these 6 types of behavior displayed at frustration, at dry frustration, which type of behavior, in your opinion, is the best? My other question to you is, which one, in your opinion, is the worst? Is the worst type of behavior? Mind you, there is something I would like to tell you. I want to tell you that your answers to my questions also reveal your own personality, by the way. I mean, I want you, it's very nice to go around, think of the people you know, and then study their behavior, observe their behavioral patterns, check them out, see what happens when their drives are frustrated. And this is very important in family life, in friendship, in social networking, and even in business. Let me give you an example. Like sometimes, some businessmen, when they call employees, potential employees, for interviews, sometimes they intentionally, on purpose, make them wait. Come tomorrow at 2 o'clock. You will meet the manager for the interview, and then the potential employee, I mean the applicant, would come and meet the secretary, so that the secretary asks him to wait in the waiting room, and she says the manager will be with you in a moment. And he sits there waiting 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then she watches his behavior, or probably there are cameras, of course, in the waiting room recording his behavior. They want to check how long is he going to sit there without going back to the secretary and asking her what time the manager will be available. And let's say, 10 minutes later, he goes to the secretary and says, when is the manager going to be available? And she says, well, he'll be available soon. Just wait, please. And he goes back to his seat and waits. And like probably for 20 minutes, his patience will collapse and he will say, I'm going home. I don't want this job, or something. And he might become aggressive. They observe the patience of these potential employees. Some of them might wait for a long time, you know. They are patient, others are not. So imagine that this job requires patience. This is how they test their patience. They're not going to ask them, are you patient or not? Of course, everybody's going to say, yes, of course I'm patient, all right? But I mean, they test these people before hiring them. And there are many, many tricks used in job interviews this is just one trick used, in order to test employees, to screen them out and see who's a fit for the job and who's not. It's a kind of screening or filtering. Okay, so psychology is really used and while they are waiting, they check. Which of these 6 types of behavior applies to them, because this is very important to determine whether they hire them or not. Another term which is important in psychoanalysis is dream work. Now, Freud introduced the concept of dream work. According to Freud, dreams are manifestations and outlets of our frustrated drives. So when a drive is frustrated, in reality, it is satisfied in dreams. Okay, when a drive is frustrated in reality, it is satisfied in dreams. Example, when you go to bed to sleep and sleep on an empty stomach, you go to bed hungry, you will dream of food. When you go to bed thirsty, you dream of water. So this process is called by Freud the dream work. Dream work. Dream work is how dreams reveal your subconscious or unconscious mind. They are expressions of your subconscious and unconscious mind. And that's why it's very important to analyze dreams. In psychoanalysis, it's very important to analyze dreams. And you can do this when you're also analyzing literary works. If you're analyzing a poem about a dream, a play, you can analyze these dreams to examine the character's subconscious mind, or even the author's subconscious mind. And by the way, each of these behavioral patterns, each of these 6 types of behavior can grow into a full dissertation. I mean, I'm talking about your research project next year. You can take each of these, well, not all of them, of course. One of them is enough, like one type of behavior, and trace it in a literary text, or characters in a novel, for example, or a play. Yeah. Now, I'm sure you are wondering if you or someone else faces this situation when drives are frustrated, which kind of behavior are you going to engage in? People are different. No two people are exactly the same, identical. So reaction to frustration differs from one individual to another. If you put 3 people in the same situation, and by the same situation, I mean you put them exactly in the same condition when the same drive is frustrated, then these 3 people may engage in 3 different types of reaction. One of them might resort to compensation, another to aggression, another to withdrawal. Every individual will react in a different way to frustration. The question is, how do we know? How do we anticipate that this person is going to, what determines the reaction of an individual? Why did this person, for example, engage in compensation, not aggression, or not withdrawal, or not displacement? Why not displacement? Why aggression? Why compensation? It depends on 3 factors. The first factor is nature, which means heredity, your genetic framework, genes, heredity. This is one of the 3 controlling factors that determine your reaction. The other one is nurture. It means your experiences in life, the way you were brought up, the way you were raised, the way you were educated, and what you experienced in the past. This also, and the lessons you learned from the past, etc. This also determines your behavior. And the third factor is the availability and environment. It means what option is available to you. Like, take compensation, probably a person who suffers from this problem of having no friends might think of picking up an animal, but no animal is available. So he's not going to engage in compensation because this option is not available. So these are the 3 factors which determine our reaction. Now we come to this point on how to apply the psychoanalytic theory to literature. Well, a literary work contains characters. and is written by an author. So you have the author and you have the characters. You can decide which one to study. You can analyze the personality of the author through his work or her work, or you can analyze the characters inside the work. Let's say you want to analyze the characters in a novel from a psychoanalytic perspective. You examine these characters' behavior. You ask yourself, what drives do these characters have? Which drives are satisfied? Which drives are frustrated? Does frustration lead to discomfort in these characters? Does discomfort lead to neurosis? Does neurosis lead to mental disorder? Are these mental problems solved at the end of the story or not? What are the expressions of the character's id or ego or superego? Which one is overactive, their id or their superego? Is their ego lenient? Does it malfunction? How do we know? From their behavior, of course, from their actions and deeds in the story. So you study their psychological problems and you examine if they are solved or not and how they are solved. Is there a message behind the solution? Is the author giving you a message based on the solution of their psychological problems? And you can also study the characters' childhood experiences. What experiences did these characters have during their childhood, and how did it affect their current adult behavior? This is especially true of novels because in novels you have a long range of time and characters develop from children to adults. Take, for example, Charles Dickens' Great Expectations. That's a classic example. Or let's say T.H. Lawrence's novels, Sons and Lovers, Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights. Yeah. And are there any images, symbols, and dreams? Are there dreams in the text? What do they reveal? But of course, you cannot apply all these, analyze all the characters in a novel. Your dissertation would be too long, and you have to focus on like the main characters, or probably only the protagonist. You should also, as I said, define your perspective. I mean, are you going to examine the characters in order to arrive at general conclusions about psychology and human behavior? Or are you going to study the text in order to analyze the character of the author, the personality of the author? Because literature is just like the dream work. You remember last week when we said literature or writing in general is one way of expressing your subconscious mind or unconscious mind. It's like a channel, it's like an outlet for your drives. So when your drives are frustrated, they can be satisfied either in the form of dreams or in the form of writing or literature. After Freud came up with his theory of psychoanalysis, many writers became theory conscious and started writing works with the intention of revealing Freudian ideas, or with psychoanalysis at the back of their minds. So they are just consciously writing the work in terms of psychoanalysis. Unlike Shakespeare, when Shakespeare was right, he didn't know about Freud, he didn't know about psychoanalysis, but according to Freud, human nature is the same everywhere, whether before Freud or after Freud. So you can analyze Shakespeare's works and Shakespeare himself in terms of psychoanalysis. And if you are wondering like which works can accommodate the psychoanalytical theory, you can take Beowulf, for example. These are classic examples. Hamlet and Oedipus. The good and evil angels seen in Christopher Marlowe's Dr. Faustus. In Dr. Faustus, in Marlowe's tragedy, there's a scene when there are two angels whispering to Dr. Faustus. The good angel, who is the um, projection of the superego, and the evil angel, who is the projection of the id, and Faustus himself is the ego, who has to decide which one to follow. The death wish in Sylvia Plath's poem Mirror, because according to psychoanalysis, the death wish is an example of withdrawal. Edgar Allan Poe's The Black Cat is also a very good example. Of course, these are just examples, but these are, the difference between these works and you can apply psychoanalysis to any literary work, but these are very clear examples. I mean, it's the psychoanalytical theory could be applied easily to these works. Maybe other works, it's like a challenge. It's very difficult to apply theory to them, but these make easy application. And as an example, you can read Edgar Allan Poe's short story, The Black Cat, by just clicking the first link will take you to the short story itself. You can read it by Edgar Allan Poe. And the second link, if you click the second link, it will take you to an essay which analyzes this short story, The Black Cat, from a psychoanalytic perspective. So this essay, it's not a very long essay, but it's a very good example. So please read the short story and read this example of how to apply it. And this, I hope, gives you a very good idea of this theory. Thank you very much for attending, and I hope everything was clear. Have a nice day, and see you next week. Goodbye.